We're seeing this with MPs.
Yes.
Right? They don't have walk-in appointments anymore. Like this is if they start changing their behavior, not going to events, meeting less and less with their voters, this is a bad thing for democracy.
We've heard before about harassment being directed towards MPs and cases of politicians being assaulted. However, a bombshell story broke today of a man being convicted of uttering death threats towards Conservatives Michael Barrett and Pierre Poilievre.
Let's take a look. Prescott, Ontario man pleads guilty to uttering death threat aimed at Conservative MP.
A Prescott, Ontario man has been banned from owning firearms and other weapons for 3 years and sentenced to 1 year probation after pleading guilty to one charge of uttering death threats, which were aimed at Ontario Conservative MP Michael Barrett. Daniel Elwood McKay entered his plea at the Ontario Court of Justice, located in Brockville, Ontario, on April 16th, according to court documents obtained by CBC News. He initially faced 2 counts of uttering death threats dating back to July 18, 2024. One threat was aimed at Barrett, who serves as his party's ethics critic, and another aimed at Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Court documents show the second charge, involving the threat against Poilievre's life, was withdrawn. McKay was also sentenced to pay $100 into a fund for victims. He lives in Barrett's Ontario riding and only lives about an hour away from Poilievre's former riding of Carleton. Barrett said that the threat against his life was made by McKay in a statement to police while they investigated threats made online against Poilievre. Quote, "I'm grateful to law enforcement and the courts for treating the matter seriously. No one in public life should be subjected to threats of violence for doing their job," end quote, Barrett said in a statement. Quote, "I chose to run for office because I want to provide hope and deliver results for the people of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes, and I'm dedicated to that every single day," end quote. MPs and security officials have been raising concerns about similar issues for months, saying threats against elected officials have reached a level that is untenable. In May, the House of Commons Sergeant-at-Arms warned that harassment of MPs has spiked almost 800% in 5 years. Patrick McDonald told a committee of MPs that his office has started, quote-unquote, bulk filing harassment complaints received by MPs because of the surge, noting that there were about 8 files involving threatening behavior in 2019, while in 2023 there were 530.
So, although we've heard a lot about this from Liberal MPs, Pam Damoff was one of them, this happens to people across the aisles. And it's especially scary when death threats are involved. I don't know why the person was so stupid as to utter a death threat while giving a statement to police, but that's another matter entirely. And, maybe it's a symptom of a mental health issue. I don't know. But this is why people have to be very careful about what they say and what they do. Now, coincidentally, back in July of last year, which is when this incident occurred in the first place, but there was no media coverage, there was an interview that David Cochrane of CBC had with the Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP talking about this exact issue.
That's an awful situation for a country to be in, isn't it? That the National Police Force needs to significantly grow its VIP protective services because of a surging trend of threats and harassment against public officials. I mean, as a citizen, that's an alarming thing to see.
It's an alarming thing, but something that we're seeing right across the globe. We're not unique. I think Canada's still fairly civilized. The amount of threats that have the ability to be able to actually follow through is smaller, but the rhetoric around those comments that are awful but lawful is what concerns me. So, if you're a politician, you got into this, but your family doesn't need to be brought into that. And if you're not going to go to an event because you're starting to hear that, that has an effect on our democracy. So what we want to do is we want to keep people safe to be able to do their job and stay in politics.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a second, but first I want to put some images up here on this monitor. This is something that happened in the last 24 hours. This is Immigration Minister Mark Miller's office. It was vandalized last night, windows smashed in, paint everywhere, black spray paint all over the walls when you get inside. When you see these images and hear about an incident like this, I mean, what do you think? What's your reaction to an incident like this?
The same as I think most people's. It's upsetting. It's an intrusion. However, I can tell you that this morning, first thing I was on the computer with the chief of staff, with the chief security officer, walking this through. We're working with the SPVM out of Montreal to be able to do this, and the sergeant at arms. Yes, this is a criminal act, and you know, it's targeted towards one of our politicians, and we can't be everywhere. But we can ensure that Minister Miller is safe.
So on this, when we see something like this happen, and this is very clearly a political act as well as a criminal act, as you say, because there's no doubt that this violates criminal code violations. What is the role then of the RCMP in terms of responding to this? I would assume local police would lead this investigation, but then where do you come in terms of ensuring that Minister Miller and his staff might be okay? Because we've heard about panic buttons and security systems getting installed in constituency offices. What do the Mounties do right now?
We've asked all of the ministers, parliamentarians, to provide us with a copy of their itinerary. We look at that, see are there any events coming up that would warrant, protests, would warrant a crowd that might not be as pro-liberal or as pro-conservative. Looking at that, assessing what we've seen before, assessing what we're seeing on social media out there. So all of that goes into our threat risk assessment to say, all right, we'll probably put some type of protective package on a minister, given it's a government announcement, given it's a fundraising. All of that goes into our threat risk.
Okay, but this is a cabinet minister. We're seeing this with MPs.
Yes.
Right? You know, they don't have walk-in appointments anymore. Like this is if they start changing their behavior, not going to events, meeting less and less with their voters, this is a bad thing for democracy and a very difficult challenge for you because of the sheer number of people involved in politics and the full range of it.
And that's a very good point. And we struggle every day with that balance. How do we keep, politicians safe? How do we then, incorporate the ability for free speech and protest? And then how do we incorporate the fact that everybody feels the right that they can go out, whether it's a minister and meet with who they need, whether it's an MP, whether, and the protesters feel. All of that's allowed. It's when it crosses that threshold of criminality that we work with police of jurisdiction all the time on this. This isn't just the Mounties. It's a constant and evolving, as well as a holistic view of the threat environment and landscape.
Now, I don't agree with David Cochrane on most things, but I think he made a very good point towards the end there, which was that because of the increase in threats and assaults and things of that nature against the MPs, they're meeting with their constituents less. They're not doing it in person, and that harms our democracy.
Well, it harms it in so many ways because Canadians in general, and we've heard this, and I'm sure Canadians feel this that watch this, you already feel like you don't have the access to your member of parliament that you should. And the issue is there's people that are going and crossing the line like this and uttering death threats, spitting on MPs, which is criminal assault, completely trashing their constituency offices. And although I think Mark Miller did a terrible job and I think he was a complete jerk in the House of Commons, I would never pick up a rock and throw it in his constituency office, and I would never commit criminal vandalism on his office. That's just, it's not constructive. It's not going to do anything. But it's not even just MPs that are experiencing this. Candidates during the election experience this as well. There's a story that was floating around about a month and a half ago when Joe Tay was trying to campaign for his riding, and he decided to make the decision to stop, because he was getting threats, and his family ended up being arrested back in Hong Kong, and he was under serious threat of some sort of action, he felt, from potential Chinese insurgents or people that were being influenced in his community. It's not right.
No, it's not. You have people who come to Canada because of our democracy, and they want to participate fully in that democracy, and end up having to drop out because competitors are threatening or joking to turn them over to the Chinese government for a bounty. Like, that's not acceptable.
And what makes that even more horrendous is there wasn't a peep from Mark Carney about that, when it happened. Not one statement, and not one statement since.
No, it's despicable. It really is.
So, that's an example of foreign interference having a significant impact on a candidate.
And the Prime Minister, again, not saying anything.
Right. So we're glad that Mr. Baird and Mr. Poilievre and their families are okay. It's got to be very unnerving getting those types of threats, knowing that you're going to be out in public, knowing that your job is to literally be accessible to your constituents.
To people you don't know, that you haven't met before.
Right. So so it's now starting to venture into the area where you need a certain amount of courage to be a politician. And that's really unfortunate, especially in Canada. So
right, we have some fantastic politicians, and it's tragic to think that maybe they would stop doing what they're doing because they're being threatened or abused, or even maybe they feel they're putting their staff at risk. I mean, you saw Mark Miller's campaign office there, or his constituency office, rather.
So unfortunately, this seems like it's going to be a new reality for the politicians. And, we all have to do our part to make sure that, we're doing the right thing.
Right. I was going to say, it doesn't have to be. There's ways for us to speak to our politicians without resorting to threats or swears or anything like that. You guys have heard me say in the past, if you're going to write your MP, let them know you're disappointed. I'm frustrated with this law that you've implemented because it affects my life in such a manner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't threaten, don't swear.
And some of the best letters that we've seen that people have sent us were so cordial, yet professionally scathing.
And poignant.
Those are the most effective letters, because that is somebody that is being respectful, but very, very surgical in how they're calling out the MP themselves. And it doesn't give the MP any ammunition to turn around and say, well, this person's a crackpot. No, this person was extremely professional, cordial in how they articulated themselves, but scathing in their criticism. And that's how we need to operate.